The Rangers are in win now mode and have very little cap space. That said, they could consider a reunion with Patrick Kane. Will they do it? We discuss on today's episode.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1321 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, Jon Chik. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So today, gonna go ahead and continue our fun-filled offseason series here where we take a look at different free agents from around the NHL and discuss whether there could be a fit with the New York Rangers. And obviously, we've got to operate within the realm of what's possible given the very limited cap space that the Rangers have. I mean, I guess there's always certain ways you can clear cap space by doing this or doing that, moving this guy, moving that guy, whatever it might be. But today, gonna have a very special edition of this UFA Spotlight series that we do. We're going to take a look exclusively at players who are one time or another did play for the New York Rangers. And we're going to start with Patrick Kane. From Kane, we're going to move on to a player that I think is destined to be probably underrated and undervalued, used to play for the Rangers, is a UFA this offseason. And then sort of a best of the rest section where we talk about other, former New York Rangers that are UFAs that might be able to be had on the open market. And like I said, we're starting with Patrick Kane. And look, when it comes to Kane, very polarizing player. He was certainly the first time around when he ended up playing with the Rangers a couple of seasons back. Of course, we're getting near the trade deadline. The Rangers pulled off a three-way deal to land Patrick Kane basically at the 0 hour. Didn't really give up a whole lot to get him because Patrick Kane really wanted to come to the New York Rangers at that time. And the Rangers went out and they got their guy. They had about 11 cents in cap space remaining by the time that was all said and done, but they found a way to make it work. And then obviously the Rangers get to the playoffs, but they lose in very disappointing fashion to the New Jersey Devils in the first round. But could there be a reunion in the works here between the Rangers and Kane? I think it's something that is at least possible. I don't think they're the front runner at all because not too long ago when the Red Wings season ended, Patrick Kane was talking about the season and his future and what it might hold and all that good stuff. And he did speak very highly of the Red Wings and seemed to be very interested in returning. The Red Wings themselves are said to be interested in a reunion there as well. So that seems to be the most likely outcome, that Patrick Kane, very likely just stays with the Detroit Red Wings. We will see. But to give him a fair trial here and talk about this from every conceivable angle, we begin with the bad. The reasons why you might want to think twice about bringing back Patrick Kane if you're the New York Rangers. First and foremost, very simply, it didn't really go all that great the last time that he was here. Something just never really seemed to click with Patrick Kane on the New York Rangers. That team really kind of sputtered in the playoffs. They got up 2-0 on the Devils. Everything looked great. They ran them out of the building twice. And then basically everything fell apart, and the Devils ended up winning that game in 7 games. Winning that series in 7 games, I should say. And when you see Patrick Kane in the locker room after that series ended, or it was actually a couple of days later on breakup day, but he was already talking about the Rangers in the past tense. It felt like at that point that he had moved on and he was looking to play somewhere else the following season. And then, of course, that's exactly what ends up happening. He spent the last 2 seasons with the Detroit Red Wings. It always just felt like very much a one-and-done situation for Patrick Kane with the New York Rangers. He just didn't really seem like himself. I mean, if you look at his numbers, especially in the playoffs, he had 6 points in those 7 games, and I think it was 12 points in 19 regular season games with the Rangers. So not terrible. It's not like he was a complete ghost or anything like that. But again, something just felt like it never really clicked the first go-around with Patrick Kane and the Rangers. The other big reason why I think certain Ranger fans are going to have their reservations about a possible reunion with Patrick Kane is very simply the age. Patrick Kane will turn 37 years old this November, and anytime you're dealing with a pro athlete who's getting up into his late 30s, there are going to be certain reservations that I think you have to have when you're evaluating him. With all that said, Kane has mostly stayed healthy the last few seasons, and he had the issue when he was with the Rangers and ended up signing last season kind of late. It was late November when he signed with Detroit and, obviously stayed with them for that season and re-signed with them for one more season. But for the most part, the last couple of years, he has stayed on the ice, and that includes this past season in which Kane skated in 72 of the 82 games for the Red Wings. So not bad. He's mostly held up despite having, at least some injury history there. The other thing, though, that I have to bring up as far as like a reason not to bring back Patrick Kane is you have to ask yourself the question, is this really and truly what the Rangers need right now? I mean, look, he's still a good player. There's no doubt about that. I think he can help you from an offensive standpoint. But for the Rangers, I think what they need more of an identity. They need more edge. They need more snarl. All those words that get thrown around, but it doesn't make it any less true. The Rangers need to be a team that is more difficult to play against. And Kane provides that in one way or another because he's another scoring threat. And obviously, you've got to keep your eye on him when he's on the ice if you're an opposing team. But is he truly like the prototypical player that the Rangers need to be adding to their roster right now? That's very debatable. I would say probably not to that. He certainly could help, but not in the ways that the Rangers most need help, namely being, physicality and edge and all that good stuff. On top of everything I just mentioned, character concerns, he's had some issues in the past and they've been covered quite a bit. We've talked about them here on this podcast. The first go around with the Rangers, when there were rumors that they were going to trade for him, we discussed it then at the time as well. But if you're a Ranger fan or just a general hockey fan, you're not the biggest Patrick Kane fan, you just don't like him, you don't want him coming near the Ranger locker room, I can certainly appreciate where you're coming from. So those are the reasons why maybe you want to stay away, if you're the Rangers, from Patrick Kane. And again, this whole thing could end up being moot if he ends up re-signing with Detroit anyway, which it seems like is the most likely outcome. But never say never. We've been surprised in the past. The first go around with the Rangers, there were people telling me when I was discussing the possibility of a trade for Patrick Kane, oh, you're wasting your time. That'll never happen. They can't fit in under the salary cap and all this stuff. And then lo and behold, they actually did pull off the trade, and he was with the Rangers for half a season. But with all that said, let's look at the good reasons why it could make some sense for the Rangers to consider a reunion with Patrick Kane. The most simple reason that I can throw at you guys right off the top here is that, as I mentioned briefly just a second ago, he is still producing. Year one with Detroit, Kane ends up with 20 goals and 27 assists for a total of 47 points in 50 games. So flirting with point-per-game territory. Year two with Detroit this season that's still ongoing here in the conference finals. Not quite as good, not quite as productive as far as like points per game for Patrick Kane, but nevertheless, 21 goals, 38 assists for a total of 59 points in 72 games for Patrick Kane. So he is still very much a productive player. Another reason why I think he's something of an appealing target for the Rangers is that he might, and I stress might, be able to be had on a one-year contract. He is coming off of a season where he played on a one-year contract. The year before that with Detroit, he was also on a one-year contract, and that might be kind of where he's at right now. He might be looking to take things season by season, or maybe not. Maybe he'd like to get a 2-year deal done and have some permanence with this team or with that team. Again, probably Detroit, but we don't know that for sure. So, the fact is, though, he could potentially be had on a one-year deal. And with that being the case, I think that's something that works well for the Rangers. The Rangers are in a situation right now this offseason where I don't think they're going to be able to spend very big in free agency. In fact, I know they're not. Even if they were to do something like trade Chris Kreider, that only opens up so much cap space. And this isn't the deepest group of free agents that we've ever seen. But I think next offseason is the one where you could see the Rangers, spend some money. There's going to be some contracts coming off the books that will make it possible to do that. And if you're the Rangers, whether it's Patrick Kane or anybody else, I think looking to bring in guys on one-year deals definitely makes some sense for this team based on where they are now. Because if you sign players for 1 year, then they become free agents after the season ends, and their contract won't eat into whatever cap space you would otherwise have to spend on free agents next offseason, an offseason which will have a deeper free agent class than the current one. And some of those guys, they're going to be free agents next offseason. They could always re-sign with their current, club. But, it's an interesting class, to say the least. Definitely look it up if you have some free time, the free agents to be next offseason. And that might be when the Rangers look to do some damage as far as signing free agents. And signing Kane or anybody else to one-year deals allows that to happen. The other thing here that could make some sense and could give you some hope if you're a Ranger fan, you really like this idea of bringing back Patrick Kane. We know that Kane really, really, really wanted to be a Ranger the last time that he was here. And he pretty much told the Blackhawks that, look, I've got my full no-move clause. That's where I want to go, and I'm not waiting for anybody but the Rangers. I don't know if he was necessarily that blunt about it, but he made his wishes very well known to the Chicago front office that that's what he's looking to do. That's where he's looking to go. And, of course, the Blackhawks, given the fact that this guy had spearheaded them to 3 Stanley Cups and obviously put together one of the best careers of any hockey player ever. I mean, the guy's a slam dunk Hall of Famer. For all those reasons, I think they wanted to honor his wishes, and they were able to get him to the Rangers and probably got a little bit less in return for that trade than they otherwise would have been able to. But obviously, Kane wanted to be here. We know part of that, or at least part of that, Panarin, the friendship there. They played together in Chicago. They won that reunion. Panarin is still here. He's got 1 year left on his deal. Maybe the thought of getting one more crack with the New York Rangers is somewhat appealing to Patrick Kane. So that's at least possible. Does he want one more shot with the Rangers? Would he be willing to take a discount to make it happen? These are questions that only Kane has the answers to. As far as the discount, I mean, you're not going to have him playing for absolutely nothing. He's not going to sign for the league minimum or anything like that. But this guy has made his money. I mean, he's made a lot of money playing hockey. He's won his Stanley Cups. And so I would think that at this point, picking and choosing what team he wants to play for, that would probably be the priority for Patrick Kane. But I can't speak for him. I don't know that for sure. One other reason is that, as far as a possible reunion with Patrick Kane and a reason in favor of it, it would very much fit with what the Rangers are doing right now. We've discussed this in the past, but the Rangers right now, for better or worse, they are looking to reload and or retool, call it whatever you want to call it. But what they are definitely not doing right now is another full-on teardown rebuild. You can look at the JT Miller trade, the Will Borgen trade, the subsequent extension for Will Borgen, essentially forcing Trouba and Goodrow off the team and moving on from the two of them. You've got Kreider potentially being traded this offseason. You've got the recent long-term extensions for Igor and Lafreniere. All of this really adds up to the Rangers continuing to attack the current window. And just kind of looking at this past season as, well, you know what? It wasn't very good. Things fell apart. Nothing really worked, but we feel like we can get back to where we were the season before that. And that's something that is at least possible. But the bottom line, the Rangers are trying to piece everything back together very quickly. And one way to do that is to try to catch lightning in a bottle with Patrick Kane. I know he's older and it didn't go great the first time around, but if you can have him on a 1-year deal, again, the Rangers have designs on contending this upcoming season. And we can debate, and we have debated, and we will continue to debate how realistic that actually is, but that's what they're trying to do. And that would very much fit with the Rangers' current plans of, attacking this upcoming season and trying to get right back into contention. Playoff track record, I mean, that speaks for itself. 3 Stanley Cups. I looked this up today. 138 points in 143 playoff games for Patrick Kane in his career. With all that said, I don't think I would do this. As I mentioned earlier, it really did not work the first time around. He's now a couple of years older. I don't feel like the upside is there with Kane as much as it was even as recently as 3 years ago, when you could still make a case that he was one of the truly elite, still truly dominant players in the NHL. And he just doesn't fit what the Rangers need right now. We've talked about their need to add some more, sandpaper and in-your-face style of hockey. That's not really Patrick Kane's forte. The one exception that I'll make here, though, again, I talked about this just a second ago, but to really drive the point home, if he was to take a big discount, if he was willing to do that, and he was willing to sign a 1-year deal, then I think it becomes something that the Rangers need to consider, because a 1-year deal does not lock you into a shaky long-term contract. And as we've mentioned before, this offseason, the Rangers have very little cap space to work with. So if Kane was willing to take something of a discount to come back with the Rangers, then I think that could make some sense. You're not going to do much better than Patrick Kane at a discounted rate with the Rangers this upcoming season as far as, value on the free agent market. So we'll see. Again, I'm not really holding my breath here, but nothing can ever be ruled out. We'll see how it goes. I still think the most likely outcome is he remains with the Detroit Red Wings, but we'll see if the Rangers try to get in on the action there when it comes to Patrick Kane. In just a second, we're going to keep everything rolling here, but we're going to shift our attention to another former New York Ranger who actually did not play hockey this season. I'll explain what I mean by that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. New to FanDuel, it is the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you will get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here. On Locked On New York Rangers, huge shout out to the everydayers as always. Definitely going to want to stick with this podcast moving forward. more draft talk, more free agent talk. In our next episode, we might actually talk about the concept of the Rangers offer sheeting a player from around the league. We've talked about potential players on the Rangers that could be offer sheeted. We've talked about how this in general could be the year of the offer sheet, given the fact that the salary cap is up and given the fact that this is not the strongest free agent class that we've ever seen in the history of the NHL, that is for sure. So maybe teams look to go that route. And the Rangers, again, they don't have a lot of cap space, so it might be difficult to offer sheet somebody, but nevertheless, we'll take a look around and see if there's anybody that could make some sense for the Rangers to make a run at via the offer sheet. But we continue going with this former Ranger-centric episode of UFA Spotlight, and we move on to Jesper Fast. Now, first of all, I understand there being some reservations here, given the fact that this guy did not play hockey this past season. He was had a serious injury, not this year, but the year before. He ended up wearing a neck brace at the end of last season, so obviously it's been a long road to recovery for Jesper Fast. He also needed neck surgery. It was good that he still had a sense of humor about it, though. They had the Carolina Hurricanes breakup day last season, and he had the neck brace on, and they were asking him about the injury and everything, and he said, it's a neck injury. You can probably all see that, and, everybody kind of got a laugh out of that. In all seriousness, though, this is entirely up to Jesper Fast and the doctors, who are qualified to, tell Jesper Fast whether he can keep playing, whether it makes sense to keep playing, whether there's any risk to keep playing. That goes far beyond my pay grade and far beyond my level of expertise. That's completely up to the doctors and Jesper Fast himself. But as of right now, no indications that Jesper Fast is giving up on his hockey career or anything like that. It sounds like, or at least there's no evidence to the contrary, that Jesper Fast wants to come back and continue playing hockey this upcoming season. However, there are plenty of reasons why he's not necessarily the most exciting option right now. I'll explain that, but then I'll explain some reasons why he could make at least some sense for the New York Rangers. Most obviously, again, I just mentioned this, but he was injured for all of last season, had to have neck surgery. And anytime you're dealing with, a neck injury, a head injury, it's serious stuff, and it's a little bit scary, certainly for the individual himself, but then also for, whatever team might be employing him or might be thinking about employing him for the upcoming season. There's certainly a decent amount of risk that comes right along with that. On top of that, another reason that might give you some reservations, Jesper Fast, like all of us really, is getting older. He will turn 34 in December, so there's that to consider as well. I mean, certainly not ancient or anything like that, but he will turn 34 in December. And at this point, with Jesper Fast, I think you pretty much have to look at him as a bottom sixer, given the fact that he didn't play hockey this past season, given the fact that that's typically the role he's in anyway. He's mostly in the bottom six as opposed to the top six. Although we have seen him play top six, both with the Rangers and also with the Carolina Hurricanes. But really at this point, I mean, for whatever team signs Jesper Fast, I think they're doing it with the idea that he'll probably play the fourth line for their team. And that's fine. That's all well and good. But the funny thing about that is that when I look at the Rangers, and we talked about this not too long ago when we were discussing Matt Rempe, I look at the Rangers' fourth line, and it's one of the least concerning aspects of this team going into next season, at least for me. Because for starters, when you're talking about the fourth line, expectations are only so high anyway. You're only going to get a certain amount of offense. You're looking for guys that are going to go out there, impose themselves physically, hopefully spend some time in the offensive zone, and essentially not lose the game for you. And I think the Rangers have three good ones left to right in Edstrom, Carrick, and Rempe. That could be, your fourth line to start next season. We'll see how it goes. But, I mean, do you really need Jesper Fast to put him on the fourth line? I mean, he could play up in the lineup a little bit too. That's at least possible. But, I don't know. I don't know if the Rangers would see him necessarily in a top 9 role or certainly a top 6 role. So there's that to consider for sure. As far as good reasons why it could make some sense for the Rangers to do their homework and consider a reunion with Jesper Fast, my biggest reason for bringing this up, for even throwing it out there as a possibility, this is a heart and soul guy. Jesper Fast has always been that dude that's going to go out there, leave it all on the ice every single night, and God knows the Rangers need more players like that. I mean, did you watch this team play hockey this past season? Who were the Ranger heart and soul players this past season? It's difficult to even come up with somebody. There were all these awards being given out, and who's going to win the Heart and Hustle Award, and who's going to win the Stephen McDonald Extra Effort Award, and that ended up being Cooley, and Quick won the Heart and Hustle Award. But it was difficult to even come up with winners. It was difficult to even come up with candidates. Jesper Fast would be in the running, I would say, for both of those things if he ended up being a member of the Rangers this upcoming season. And you could also mark him down for the Bill Masterson nominee for the Rangers as well, because that goes to the player that's overcome the most adversity. And obviously, Jesper Fast has dealt with this serious neck injury. If he comes back and has any kind of a season, I would bet a lot of money that the Rangers were going to nominate him as their Bill Masterson, nominee. But again, just somebody who's always wearing his hard hat, goes out there and checks, plays a physical style, plays every shift like it's his last. And again, as I say all these things right now, what player on the Rangers from this past season am I currently describing? I don't know who that would be. There were so many guys that would, that they'd show up one night and then they'd take a few nights off. It was like that the entire season, pretty much off and on. But Jesper Fast is that guy. And this is a Ranger team that needs some more fire. They need to play some more inspired hockey. And if you were to come back and Jesper Fast is your teammate, don't you owe it to that guy alone to go out there and compete hard and maybe back check once in a while? Right? This is a guy that just dealt with a serious neck injury. So maybe he could inspire the Rangers a little bit. From that perspective, it's at least possible. My second big reason for having some interest in Jesper Fast and having some interest in this potential reunion here, I think it would cost next to nothing to sign this guy. And as we've talked about, very well documented fact, the Rangers do not have a lot of cap space right now. They've got to work, within their means. And with that said, Jesper Fast, this is somebody that didn't even play hockey this past season. So I think for a lot of GMs around the league, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. I don't think there's too many teams around the league right now that are, planning their offseason around the idea of signing Jesper Fast. And I mean no disrespect by that, but facts are facts. Jesper Fast did not play hockey this past season. And even when he was healthy, he's somebody that only has, so much offensive upside. He's mostly a defensive specialist forward, somebody that can kill some penalties, help you in that way, but certainly not a superstar player. But if you look at his most recent contracts, when he left the Rangers, signed for 3 years with the Canes at $2 million per season. And then he signed a 2-year extension with the Canes at $2.4 million per season. As far as this upcoming, free agency for Fast is concerned, and again, you got to remember, he didn't play this past year. And the year before that, just 19 points in 73 games. Again, he's more of a defensive forward and a gritty type player rather than an offensive juggernaut, but still only 19 points in 73 games. So, what are we talking here? Like, could you get Jesper Fast for a year or two at like $1.75 million per season? That might be about all that it takes at this point. And again, I realize this is not a superstar player. This is not somebody that's going to make or break the Rangers next season, but you only have so much cap space at your disposal here that you can possibly use. So if you want somebody that could be had at a discount, somebody that would have a decent chance, I would say, of outperforming his contract next season, whether it's with the Rangers or anybody else, then I think it might make some sense to at least pick up the phone, at least do your due diligence on Jesper Fast. On top of everything I just mentioned, this is a player that is very, very committed as far as the defensive aspect of the game is concerned. And as we've mentioned, the Rangers could use a heck of a lot more of that. The Ranger forwards this past season, back checking was optional. If you felt like doing it, do it. If you didn't feel like doing it, you didn't have to do it. That's basically where things were. Jesper Fast is going to back check like a maniac. He's going to forecheck like a maniac too. He's all over the ice, and he's just somebody that brings the kind of spirit, brings the kind of energy that, again, I think the Rangers could certainly use more of. And in the case of Jesper Fast here, you can do it at what I think would be certainly a discounted rate, a very affordable contract, next season. And on top of everything else, look, he was drafted by this Ranger team. How much does that mean to Jesper Fast? I don't know. He was a 6th rounder, so somebody that obviously beat the odds, greatly eclipsed his draft status. There are 6th rounders that never even play a game in the NHL, that never even really get all that close. And obviously he got there and has stuck in the NHL ever since. By the time he left the Rangers the first time, he was the 3rd or 4th longest tenured player on the team. And he'd be rejoining some former teammates. He played with Panarin. He played with Mika and Kreider. Fox was there. Igor Shesterkin had just debuted that season as well. So he's got some former teammates there. It's possible. And again, a lot of this hinges on his health. He's got to get cleared first. That's first and foremost. But if you want a role player that you're familiar with, that brings a certain amount of energy, that won't cost a whole lot, at least make the phone call to Jesper Fast, and let's see if anything can get done here. Fast was a very popular player as a member of the Rangers among the fan base, and it's very easy to see why for anybody that watched his brand of hockey back then. Never a superstar player, but always brought the effort, always brought the intensity, always brought the energy. And again, the Rangers are dying for a player of that mold, especially after what we saw this past season. So in just a second, we're going to sort of have a rapid fire list of former New York Rangers that we can talk about a little bit. To me, Kane and Fast were the ones I wanted to talk about in great detail, but there are some other ones out there. Former New York Rangers who were UFAs. We'll get to a couple of them in just a second. All right, so once again, sort of a best of the rest section here as far as former New York Rangers are concerned that are current UFAs. We will start with Tyler Motte. I'm not holding my breath here, but I know he was a fan favorite when he was here. I just don't know how much he wants to be a New York Ranger because he's had chances in the past. The Rangers, for anybody that might need a refresher, 2 consecutive trade deadlines, they acquire Tyler Motte at the deadline, and they do so for, it was a 4th round pick the one year, and then the other year I think it was for Julien Gauthier. It might have been straight up, or there might have been like a late round pick involved there, but the bottom line, they brought in Tyler Motte at the trade deadline for 2 consecutive seasons. And once both of those seasons ended, there was some speculation, some talk among Ranger fans, even some reports out there from, various reporters that there is interest in a reunion and Tyler Motte might end up being back with the New York Rangers. Then, of course, it didn't happen. Both seasons, he kind of lingered as a free agent and then ended up signing for basically the league minimum on a 1-year deal. It was $800K in both instances. Tyler Motte, 3 straight off seasons, has had to sign a 1-year deal. It was a $1.35 million deal with Ottawa, then an $800K deal with Tampa, then $800K deal with the Detroit Red Wings. So clearly he can be had at a very small price, which is also one of the reasons why he, I think, would be somewhat appealing to the Rangers. He's coming off a season that saw him play 55 games with Detroit, 4 goals, 5 assists, minus 11 minutes and 19 seconds of ice time per night, 48 block shots, and 72 hits. He is somebody that, you can like as a scrappy, tenacious player, somebody who can go out there and kill some penalties, a very good defensive forward to be sure. Motte could help, but again, I'm not holding my breath because he had every opportunity to re-sign with the Rangers the last couple of times that he was with this team, and he chose not to do so, and that's completely fine. He can go out and sign with whatever team he wants to sign with, but he might not be somebody that's looking to sign with the New York Rangers, and that's okay. Moving on here. So here's one that's a little bit out there, but let's have some fun with this. Ryan Lindgren. Now, I realize, obviously, the Rangers just traded him at this trade deadline. So you might be wondering, why would they bring him back? I'm going to get into that in just a second. But I will say off the top here, I don't know that Lindgren is going to be all that happy to come back to a team that was in turmoil and that traded him, and a team that only offered him a 1-year deal, this past offseason. So there's all that to get around as well. Plus, there's the fact that the Rangers, I don't know how interested they would be in a reunion either. I mean, I guess it's at least possible, but, they traded him away and they only went to 1 year with Ryan Lindgren as far as that extension was concerned this past offseason. But here's the one reason why I would give this a glimmer, emphasis on a glimmer of a chance for happening. First of all, Lindgren is one of those players that, to me at least, I feel like he's going to have a very complicated free agent market and a very unpredictable free agent market. He is somebody that it is very difficult to kind of assess what fair market value for him would be because he has been a good player. He's still relatively young. I want to say Lindgren is like 26-ish at this point. And he is somebody that, played on the top pairing of a Ranger team that twice went to the conference final with him doing so. With all that said, he also plays a very physical, very demanding style. The injuries have kind of caught up to Ryan Lindgren in recent seasons. And this probably was, this past season, the worst season that he's had in the NHL. So what does all of that add up to? How much does his previously good track record work in his favor? How much does his recent injury history and this rough past season work against him? I mean, we're all going to find out once free agency begins. But free agency in the NHL is very interesting because when it begins, one of 2 things happens if you're a free agent in the NHL. Either you sign with your new team within about 30 seconds of free agency beginning, or you don't sign on that first flurry that we always see, and you kind of linger as a free agent beyond that. And at times, these guys will be out there for weeks, even months before they, eventually sign with a new team. I think Ryan Lindgren could be in that latter group for all the reasons that I just mentioned. Again, very, very difficult to come up with a number and a contract length that is fair for Ryan Lindgren and fair for the team that is going to sign him. So if that were to happen, if Lindgren were to, not sign once that first flurry of free agency begins, and if he were to linger for a little while, then I think at that point, if the Rangers have not addressed their blue line, and maybe they will, maybe they won't, we don't know. But at a certain point, if Lindgren's just kind of chilling there as a free agent and the Rangers don't have the left defenseman that they need, do they call him up? Do they give it a chance? Do they see if Lindgren wants to come back on another 1-year deal at a reasonable cost if the Rangers still have some cap space remaining and no good way to use it? It's possible. As far as like putting a percentage on this, I would put it at like 2 or 3%, maybe. I would have to go less than 5%. There's a lot of hurdles to get around here, and he did just leave this team. But if you're Drury and the Rangers, Drury could use a win. Drury has had a rough, recent run as Ranger GM. But if you can bring back Ryan Lindgren on a 1-year deal at an affordable cost, and you have Ryan Lindgren back this season, just a couple of months after trading him and getting a second-round pick in exchange for Ryan Lindgren, then you're kind of having your cake and eating it too, right? And you would have that second rounder and Ryan Lindgren left only to lose in the first round of the playoffs. And then he comes right back to the Rangers anyway. It's a long shot. And if I'm the Rangers, I would not even think about going for more than 1 year. That's what they did this past offseason with Ryan Lindgren, but crazier things have certainly happened. Other than that, I mean, there's other names out there. There's nobody that I'm going to go into too much depth on here. Jack Roslovic is a UFA at the end of this season. Had a hot start with the Canes, cooled off considerably, and he's been a healthy scratch multiple times for the Canes in the playoffs. Not sure if he'll end up staying there, but I don't think the Rangers would bring him back. Jimmy Vesey, Riley Smith, I mean, they were both here. They both got traded at the trade deadline this past season. I don't think either one of them will be back. I mean, I guess with Riley Smith, with how obsessed the Rangers were in landing this guy, I guess you never know for sure. Maybe they'll come knocking again this offseason, but I don't see it. I mean, some of these names, like Jared Tenorti is out there, Julian Gauthier, Kevin Rooney. I don't think too many people are going to be banging their fists on the table to bring one of these guys back. Alex Georgiev, I mean, that's not going to happen either. The bottom line, look, reunions, I should say, can be fun. But this time around, I don't think there's anything that really jumps off the page. I don't think there's anything that really makes a ton of sense if you're the Rangers as far as, former Rangers that are free agents that you would want to bring back. Like I said, we wanted to give everybody a fair trial here, and I think we've done that. Spent some time on Kane, spent some time on Jesper Fast. All of these things I think are at least possible. You can never say that it's a 0% chance of happening, but I know Ranger fans can be nostalgic. They can be into the idea of a former Ranger coming back to Broadway, and I can too. This time around, though, I'm not really seeing it. I'm not really feeling it as far as a former Ranger coming back to this team, but we'll see what happens. There's some merit to bringing some of these guys back, depending on what the contract is, the length of the contract, all that good stuff. But again, there's not an obvious fit to me as far as the Rangers and a former UFA, or a former player that is a UFA. But we'll call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter @JChick17, and definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.